one day I decided to start exploring Japanese literature. And, you know, controversial as it may be to say now, my public library had a couple of Mishima Yukio books, and that really cemented it for me. So once I started reading the literature of Japan, of course, translated into English, I realized this is a worldview that I had never experienced anywhere else before, but it spoke to me in a way that nothing else had up to that point. Just the way of appreciating the quiet moments in life, the deep ways that emotions can impact us as individuals. So all of that just sort of combined together in my mind, and I realized I need to follow this. I need to make this part of my life. So throughout high school, university, I studied a lot of Japanese literature. I, of course, took a couple of language courses. And after graduating, I found myself working at the Japan Foundation in Toronto. So the Kokusai Koryu Kikin, for anyone who's familiar, they have offices all over the world. Started as a volunteer experience. It ended up being an employment experience. But the strange thing was that everyone else working there was, of course, from Japan. They were Japanese. A couple of Canadians worked there. But I was the only one that had never been to Japan before. And it was starting to, make people wonder. You have all this interest in Japan. You've never been there. Don't you find that a bit strange? And it was that point in my life where I thought, I really do need to do something about this. So I think, like a lot of people, I applied for the JET program. Like a lot of people, I intended to go to Japan for 1 year and then come back. And that was more than 13 years ago now. So I'm here. So I did 3 years on the JET program. After that, I went back to Canada for a short time to work at the Japanese embassy in Toronto, sort of just putting feelers out. At the end of the JET program, a lot of people, I think, wonder, do I want to stay in Japan? Do I want to go back? Do I want to go somewhere else? What do I want to do? So I went back to Toronto for a short time. I should mention I'm from Toronto originally. Um, and I thought, this doesn't really feel like home anymore. But at the same time, I obviously can't make a life for myself in rural Kochiken, which is where I had been living. Beautiful place, by the way. If everyone has not been to Kochi before, please visit if you can. But my heart was still in Japan. I still wanted to find some way to go back there. And so the next opportunity that presented itself to me was a pretty fascinating one. I was searching for work in Japan from Canada, and I found a job as in a position called a super sub. So I was an English teacher that was called in, kind of like the Navy SEALs, when there's an emergency situation. So, for example, an English teacher suddenly leaves the country and cannot be located anymore, or they've burned their bridges with the local board of education. We can't send them to work anymore. We need someone else, and we need them fast. So that was my life for about a year, which was really fascinating. I would get calls from the office and say, and we need you to go to rural Toyama for maybe 2 weeks. Can you do it? And we need you to go on Monday. And so it was a fascinating experience. Obviously, moving all around the country, I got to live in so many different parts of Japan for about a week or two, sometimes a month at a time. Um, and from there, I transitioned into a kind of managerial role. So I was supervising English teachers as they were dispatched all around Kanagawa Prefecture. And that's when I really started to find my niche. So I had transitioned from being interested in Japan, the literature, the culture, as sort of more of a hobby, and trying to put out feelers and figure out what I wanted to do exactly professionally. So in that managerial role, I started being tasked with kind of meeting with teachers on an individual basis to help motivate them and find out, how they can improve their relationships with their schools, observing the way they teach their lessons. And then from there, I started moving into weekly and monthly sort of board of education wide meetings. So we scheduled these meetings for all of the teachers in a given board of education to kind of get together and, well, air their grievances, or talk about professional development, or maybe changes to the curriculum that are coming. So you can think of them essentially as town hall meetings, where I was effectively something like a local politician. So I was sort of a middleman between the company who employed all of these English teachers. So, trying to give them the company line and make them understand why things are happening the way they are. But then at the same time, I was a representative for them because I had had the experience of being an English teacher for so long in so many different situations. So when they had concerns, I could understand where they were coming from. So it was a process of sort of relaying back and forth between the company and the teachers, each side's messages in a way that was sort of filtered and tailored to the interests of either side. and I really enjoyed that. But at the same time, I felt that I had not yet explored my passion, my more creative side, that what really brought me here in the first place, which was, back in university, I had always dreamed of becoming a translator of Japanese fiction. Obviously, not the kind of thing you dream of if you're hoping to make a ton of money in your career, but that was what motivated me emotionally. So, at the same time that I was doing this management job, the opportunity to begin localizing video games came along. And, as long as they're text heavy, story heavy, very narrative driven, I think video games can be a really fascinating form of expression. So, it was something that I was interested in trying, of course. I had done all kinds of volunteer translation work up to that point. So, we're talking about Japanese into English. And so, for a couple, well, maybe a year and a half, I was doing both. I was doing the management stuff, sort of 9 to 5, and then evenings and weekends, I was doing the translation work. Needless to say, I was very busy, but it was a great time. I was making connections with all kinds of people, and then somewhere along the line, my first child was born. My daughter was born, and I was lucky enough to be able to make the translation gig kind of my full time thing. I was getting enough work, and I was enjoying it, and making enough money that I was able to focus on that for sort of the most of the first year of my daughter's life. But I kept in touch with the management position. So even as I left that position, I kept in touch with that company. I said, if any interesting opportunities come along in the near future, feel free to reach out to me and keep me posted. And that's exactly what happened. So I was put in touch with someone from a company called Link Global Solution, which is one of the kogaisha, so one of the, I guess, subsidiary companies of the same parent company as the company I'd been working for before. And they said, we do these intercultural communication seminars. We do, professional skills training for a number of different industries, a number of different clients in Japan. We're sort of in a pinch right now. I got this call, one weekend, completely out of the blue, and they said, we need somebody tomorrow to go to Narita Airport and work on the English skills training for the bus drivers who work out of the airport. And I said, okay, sounds fun. I'm available. Let me give it a try. And it turned into the next 5 years of my career. So that's how I was introduced to the company called Link Global Solution, which, if you've never heard of them before, intercultural ibunka communication is the specialty. They do kind of customized boutique seminars for all kinds of different clients all across Japan, sometimes internationally as well. And I spent 5 years as a facilitator with that company, and it was the best professional experience of my life. So, conducting full day, sometimes multiple day seminars, both in English and in Japanese, just helping professionals to either become more globally aware, more capable of communicating across cultures, or honing in and really brushing up particular skills, whether it be giving presentations in English or negotiations or meeting management, whatever it may be. And that was all going along very beautifully. And then a little thing called the coronavirus pandemic happened, which you may remember. And that sort of threw everything into chaos, obviously, right? So the business model for Link Global Solution, and I think for a lot of companies, suddenly became a bit uncertain. Are we going to be able to continue having these seminars in person with all these clients when we're not even sure if people can go to work? If you remember the very early days of the pandemic, it was just completely chaotic, right? So it looked to me as though it might be time to sort of look for that next challenge. And being a corporate trainer, I always felt that I could benefit from having more corporate experience myself. Working inside of a large Japanese corporation was something I had not done up to that point. I'd worked in certainly Japanese organizations, a number of different kinds, but I hadn't had that traditional, zaibatsu style experience. So an opportunity at Rakuten presented itself, and the timing was just kind of perfect. An acquaintance of a friend of mine was working there, was looking to expand the global corporate communications team at Rakuten, and my experience and my skills kind of lent themselves well to that. So I moved to Rakuten to a full-time seishain position in September of 2020. I spent 2 years at that position, which was fantastic. I got to do so many different kinds of event planning, obviously press releases, being involved in Rakten's quarterly corporate earnings reports, doing social media stuff for executives. Just tons of amazing experiences, again, in English and in Japanese. And part of the corporate culture at Rakuten is interesting because it's encouraged for employees to kind of move around within the company, to try different things, try working for different departments and different teams. So after 2 years in corporate communications, sometimes called global PR, I decided that, I wanted to try something new, try something a little different. And there was a relatively new department inside of Rakuten called the Corporate Culture Division. And specifically, they were looking for someone to help with employee engagement, which I think outside of Japan, especially in a lot of advanced economies, certainly North America and Europe, employee engagement is kind of taken for granted as something that all large companies have, right? It's an extension of HR. It's common. Everyone sort of expects it. In Japan, on the other hand, employee engagement is sort of just getting started, sort of just finding its footing. A lot of companies haven't really started in earnest doing that yet, but as it often is, Rakuten was kind of ahead of the curve on that. And it just seemed like a perfect fit for what I have done up until this point, right? So it's an opportunity to, again, engage in seminar style trainings, direct one on one communication with employees at Rakuten, try and find ways to make their employment experience more meaningful, keep them engaged so that they are able to contribute to the company. Uh, you know, Employee engagement really is about finding ways to keep employees productive, right? So very similar to what I was doing before with Link Global Solution in a way, only this time doing it in-house and doing it for a very different kind of audience. One thing you may or may not know about Rakuten is the workforce there is really incredibly diverse. Even just within Rakuten Tokyo, there are people from more than 100 different countries all working together, which I think is pretty hard to find in Tokyo, right? There probably aren't too many companies who can claim that kind of diversity. So just again, incredible opportunity. So as you follow along my career trajectory, obviously non-traditional. Imagine trying to explain this to recruiters. That's something I've had to do in the past. You can imagine how those conversations go. But I think the common trend that you probably noticed is that it's all about saying yes to opportunities that come along somewhat unexpectedly, responding in a quick and proactive way to, challenges that are sort of outside of my control or that I did not foresee. And, you know, planning in advance in a way that sets me up to be able to transition into, you know, positions that become available. So I think that's really the key to finding your niche. Whatever your niche may be, it's investing in skills for yourself that you will be able to apply in a number of different situations.